How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Ayin Gimel, Daf 73 of Masechta BavaKama. Friends, I think we're like halfway through Perek Meruba, which is cool. I think Meruba is like 20 daf, which is it's kind of long. It is called Meruba. Meruba, I guess, means like a lot. But alright, we're like halfway through the Perek. So far, it's been cool. Okay, we're going to continue with this discussion of Eidim Zomimin, says the Gemara on Daf Ayin Gimel Amud Aleph, about 6-7 lines into the Amud at the two dots right after Yal Kigam Tnan Gonav Al Pi Shnayim. Okay, so our Mishnah had said that if Shimon, one set of witnesses testify that Shimon stole Ruvain's ox, V'tavachu Macher Al Piem, and that same group and that same set of witnesses testify that Shimon slaughtered or sold Ruvain's ox, v'nimtzeu zomimin, and it turns out that they're Eidim Zomim Mishalmin es Hakol. So they're responsible to pay for everything, right? Meaning you have one set of witnesses who testified that Shimon not only stole, but oichet slaughtered or stole Ruvain's ox, so they were going to be mechayev him dalad v'hei, or in this case hay. So if they turn out to be Eidim Zomimin, so then they need to pay Shimon 5 times the amount of what he stole. So my love, so what are we talking about? Sheidu ala gneva, that it's talking about, well, where they testified about the, one second. Yeah. So they testified about the Geneva, that Shimon stole Ruvain's ox, v'chazru v'eidu ala tvicha. And then, separately, they testified that Shimon slaughtered the ox. Right? So they didn't just testify in one fell swoop that Shimon stole and slaughtered Ruvain's ox. Rather, they testified that Shimon they testified, let's say on Sunday, that Shimon stole Ruvain's ox, and on Monday they testified that Shimon slaughtered Ruvain's ox. Okay, where am I? And then they first became Eidim Zomimin with regard to the Gneva, and then they became Eidim Zomimin with regard to the Tvicha, to the slaughtering. Now, if it enters your mind, like Abaye says, that Eid Zomim Limafreya who Nifsal, well then I don't understand. Hanikim de Idzame Lehu Agneva. Well, once already they became Eidim Zomimin for the Gneva, Igloi Milsa Limafreya, well then we're saying already from the time that they testified about the Gneva, L'chi ashadu atvicha psulin havu. Well, if we're saying that l'mafreyu nifsal, well then that means that they're already psulin from the time that they testified about the Geneva. So then by the time that they went to testify about the tvicha, they were already eidim psulin. So then then the testimony that they provided for the tvicha is irrelevant. So why should they be chayiv hey? They should only be chayiv kefil. So why should they have to pay the additional 3 times for the tvicha? Their testimony by the tvicha was pasul. So Gemara says, well, we're talking about where they first became Eidim Zomimin for the tvicha, and they were mechayiv for the 3 times the amount, and then they became Eidim Zomimin for the Geneva, and that's when they were chayiv for the additional 2 times. But but they say, meh, you can't fool us. At the end of the day, even if they were first became Eidim Zomimin for the Tvicha, but ultimately, when they then became Eidim Zomimin for the Geneva, if we say Eidim Zomimin Nimafreya hu Nifsal, so then when they become Eidim Zomimin for the Geneva, so then at that point we say, well, from the time of the Geneva they were pasul, which now with this new knowledge, with this new information, we now know that at the time that they testified about the Tvicha, they were already psulin from the time of the Geneva. So Igloi Milsa Dechi Asadu at Tvicha Psulin avusum and Mele, when they were testifying about the tvicha, they were already psulin. So, amay mishamei tvicha. So then, why should they have to pay for the tvicha? They were apostle at the time of that testimony. It's not good testimony. So the Gemara says, look, you know what? It's talking about a scenario. The scenario where they would be chayiv, all five payments, would be where they testified in one fell swoop that Shimon stole and slaughtered Reuven's animal, and then Reuven's cow, ox, and then they became Edom Zomim. So therefore, they became Edom Zomim at that time that they gave that testimony, which that their testimony included both the Gneva and the Tvicha, and that is why they are chayiv all five payments, because their testimony that they gave that they're being Edom Zomim for was included both the Gneva and the Tvicha aspects, and that is why they're chayiv for all 5 times. Lema kitanoi. So let's say that this machloikes about Edom Zomim limafreya unifsol or mikanu lahaba unifsol, let's say it's take a machloikes tanoim. Hayushnai mi'idin also shegonav. If 2 witnesses, right? If a set of witnesses testify that Shimon stole Reuven's ox, ve'hein mi'idin also shetovach, and then that same set of witnesses testified that he slaughtered Reuven's ox, vehuzmu ala gneva, and they became Edom Zomim vis-a-vis the gneva, edus shebatla miktsasa batla kula. Well then, the testimony that is partially batal is entirely batal, i.e., once already you say that the theft never happened, that they were Edom Zomim with regard to the theft, so then it also falls apart with regard to the slaughter. Huzmu ala tvicha, but if they only became Edom Zomim with regard to the slaughtering, well, then their testimony stands with regard to the theft. Hu mishalim tashlumei kefel vehein mishalmin tashlumei shlosha. One second. Right. Exactly. So when they become Edom Zomin on the Geneva, so the whole thing falls apart, because if there was no Geneva, then there's no Tvicha, right? Again, if they're just testifying that he slaughtered, I mean, that's only a problem if he stole, but since they became Edom Zomin for the theft, so then there's no longer any testimony about the slaughtering. But if they only became Edom Zomim about the slaughtering, well, their testimony about the Geneva could still be true, and therefore Shimon is going to have to pay kefel for the Geneva, but they would pay him the remaining 3 payments for the tvicha that they became Edom Zomim about. Right, so again, who's mala tvicha? If they became Edom Zomim about the tvicha, who mishalim tashlumei kefel? So he has to pay the kefel, because the testimony about the theft still stands. Vein mishalim tashlumei shlosha, but they have to pay him the 3 times amount that they were trying to be mechayiv from, that they became Edom Zomim about. Rabbi Yossi, now says Rabbi Yossi, Bomed v'amamurim, when do we say this? Right, so when do we say that he would have to pay kefel and they would pay him the remaining three times? Bishtei edis, only if there were 2 testimonies. We're going to have to explain what this means. But if it was 1 testimony, well then, even if they became Edom Zomim with regard to the tvicha, it would also, their testimony would be disqualified as well for the Geneva if it was 1 testimony. So my b'shtei edios umay eid be'edus achas. So now, what does this mean when Rabbi Yossi says that if it was 2 testimonies, so then they could be Edom Zomim just for the Tvicha, but not for the Geneva? But if it was 1 testimony, then they would be Edom Zomim both for the Tvicha and for the Geneva. So if when we say B'shtei Edius Mamish, literally with 2 testimonies, B'shtei Kitos, with two groups of witnesses, be'edus achas, and if it's one testimony, bekas achas, boze achar zeh, with one set of witnesses who testify separately, right? On Sunday they testify that Shimon stole Reuben's ox, and on Monday they testify that Shimon slaughtered Reuben's ox. From Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Yossi says be'edus achas, that when it comes to one testimony, meaning because achas boze achar zeh, when it's one set of witnesses who testify on Sunday about the gneva and on Monday about the tvicha, so ki misaide a gneva v'hadu misaide a tvicha, when they testify about the theft, and then they testify about the tvicha, right? On Sunday they testify about the theft, on Monday they testify about the slaughtering, ki mitzamei atvicha, and then they become edim zomim for the tvicha, edus shebatla miktsasa batla kula. So we're saying, well then, if they became edim zomim about the tvicha, then in Mela they're also edim zomim about the geneva, v'itzamuluhu agneva, that they're also edim zomim for the geneva, mehecha tesi. How does that make any sense? Meaning, if we say that what Rabbi Yossi is saying, that if it's be'edus achas, and we're saying that edus achas means one group of witnesses, one set of witnesses, but they're giving the testimony on two separate days. So you have one set of witnesses, and they're coming on Sunday and saying that Shimon stole Reuben's ox, and then on Monday they're saying that Shimon slaughtered Reuben's ox. And what Rabbi Yossi is saying, that in that case, even if they only became Edim Zomim for the Tvicha, which happened on Monday, they would still be considered Edim Zomim for the Gneva that they testified about, which they're saying they witnessed on Sunday. And we're saying Edus Shabbat L'Muktsasa Bat L'Kula, that since they're Edim Zomim about the Tvicha, Memela they're also Edim Zomim about the Gneva, but that doesn't make any sense. Remember, what's Edim Zomim? Edim Zomim is Imanu Ayisem B'Makom Ploni, that you couldn't testify about that because you were with us on that day and that time. But if they're only Edim Zomim about what they testified about on Monday, right? That this other set of witnesses came and said, you couldn't have witnessed Shimon slaughter Reuven's ox because when you're saying that it happened on Monday on such and such a time, you were with us on Monday, but that has no bearings on what they're testifying about Sunday. He could have still witnessed what happened on Sunday, so that wouldn't make sense, right? To say that it's talking about one set of witnesses who testified on two separate days, right? They said that on Sunday they said that they saw him, right? They said that they saw Shimon slaughter on Sunday. They saw Shimon steal the ox on Sunday, and then they said that they saw Shimon slaughter the ox on Monday. It wouldn't make sense to say that if they become Edim Zomim about the Tvicha, and maybe they're Edim Zomim about the Gneva, because they're two separate days. While clearly they didn't see what they're claiming to have seen on Monday, but they could have seen what they claimed to have seen on Sunday. So Elalav, rather b'shtei edis, when we're talking about two edis, it means be'edus achas ke'ein shtei edis. No, that means one set of witnesses that are testifying on two separate days, like we've just been describing, umayninu kasachas boza acharze, that you have one set of witnesses, but they're testifying that Shimon stole the ox on Sunday, and that they witnessed Shimon stealing the ox on Sunday, and then that they witnessed him slaughtering it on Monday. Be'edus achas, right? In that case, we say that if they become Edim Zomim for the Tvicha, that has no bearing on the Gneva because they were on two separate days. Be'edus achas bevas achas, but if they come and this one set comes to Beis Din and says, we saw Shimon steal and slaughter that ox at the same time, well then, if they become Edim Zomim vis-a-vis the Tvicha, they would also be Edim Zomim vis-a-vis the Geneva. And we want to say that both the Chachamim and Rabbi Yossi, right? So Rabbi Yossi is making this distinction, right? So Rabbi Yossi is saying if they become Edim Zomim on the Tvicha, then they're also Edim Zomim, right? Meaning the Tanakama had said that if they become Eidim Zomim on the Tvicha, but they are not necessarily Eidim Zomim on the Geneva. Rabbi Yossi says, wait, there's a caveat. That's only if it was on 2 separate days. But if it was the same day, so then even if they become Eidim Zomim only for the Tvicha, it also applies to the Geneva as well. Apparently, the Tanakama, though, does not agree with that. And they would say, no, even if it's at the same time, if they become Eidim Zomim on the Tvicha, that doesn't affect the Geneva. So now we're saying that the Chuli Amatoch de Dibur Kedibur Dami, that both the Chachamim and Rabbi Yossi agree that if you say 2 things, B'toch de Dibur, we're going to explain Toch de Dibur at the end of the daf, or at least where we're going to stop today. Meaning, if you say one thing and then immediately you say something else, it's all connected. So we're assuming that both the Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi agree that if you say everything all together, they're connected. So if they testified about the Geneva, and in the same breath they testified about the Tvicha, so then it's all kind of one testimony. So it must be that the machlokas is that the Rabbanon Savir Mikanu Lahaba Hu Nifsol, that the rabbis who say that even though they're testifying, in the same breath about the Geneva and the Tvicha, but when they become Eidim Zomimin only for the Tvicha, it's Mikanu Lahaba Hu Nifsal. So meaning this set of witnesses testify that Shimon stole and slaughtered this animal, but then, a month later, the other witnesses come and say, wait a second, how could you have witnessed that? Imanu Ayisim B'makom Ploni, but Mikanu Lahaba Unifsal, they only become pasul from that time, from a month later, from that time and onwards, and it only applies to what they're testifying about, to the Tvicha, but it doesn't have any bearings on the Geneva. Since they're only becoming Eidim Zomin and Psulin from that point on, Atvicha dekam mitzameh itzum. So only with regard to the Tvicha, which they're becoming Eidim Zomim about, that is what they're becoming Eidim Zomim about. But HaGeneva lo mitzameh lo itzum. But in terms of the Geneva, that they didn't become Eidim Zomim about, that remains intact. Whereas Rabbi Yossi suffered them afreyu nifsal, whereas Rabbi Yossi says Eidim Zomim are psulin retroactively from the time of the testimony. V'chein de mezid de miyad ki asidu hu de mifsale ki itzmu la atvicha itzmu la lehunami agneva da toch de dibor ki dibor dami. Whereas Rabbi Yossi says that Eidim Zomim mafreu nifsal, that they become psulin already from the time that they gave the testimony, and at that time, if we're saying that they were Eidim Zomim at that time, because they gave the testimony about the Geneva and the Tvicha at the same time, and we're saying that they were Eidim Zomim about the Tvicha, which they said Toch de Dibra at the same time of the Geneva. So if they're psulim on the Tvicha, Memela they're also psulim at that same time. If they were psulim for the Tvicha, then they're psulim at that same time on the Geneva. So that is why Rabbi Yossi says that in that case, if they become Eidim Zomim on the Tvicha, then they're Oichet Eidim Zomim on the Geneva. So now the Gemara says, look, the Gemara says, no, actually everybody agrees the Mafreu Nifsal, the Eidim Zomim the Mafreu Nifsal. And if we say Toch de Dibur Kedibur Dami, so then everybody would agree that just like their Eidim Zomim vis-a-vis the Tvicha, then Oichet vis-a-vis the Geneva. Elohacha b'toch de Dibur Kedibur Dami kamiflege. But here the machlokas is taka, do we say Toch de Dibur Kedibur Dami? Rabbanan Savi Toch de Dibur Lav Kedibur Dami. Rabbi Yossi Savar Toch de Dibur Kedibur Dami. That the Rabbanan say Toch de Dibur is not considered like it's all one testimony. And so the Rabbanan say that it's not considered like all one testimony, and therefore they can become Eidim Zomim for the Tvicha without being Eidim Zomim for the Geneva, because that was a separate, claim. Right? They can be Eidim Zomim for the Tvicha, but not for the Geneva. Whereas Rabbi Yossi says Toch de Dibur Kedibur Dami, that is all one claim, and therefore if they become Eidim Zomim for the Tvicha part of the claim, then they're also Eidim Zomim for the Geneva part of the claim. But fact, the Gemara v'Savar Rabbi Yossi Toch de Dibur Kedibur Dami? Does Rabbi Yossi really hold Toch de Dibur Kedibur Dami? V'Altanam, we learn in the Mishnah, Harezo Tmuras Ola Tmuras Shlamim, Harezo Tmuras Ola Divrei Reb Meir. Reb Meir says that if a fellow it says about an animal, this is going to be instead of my korban ola, or this is going to be instead of my korban ola, this is going to be instead of my korban shlomim. Kilu, in the same breath, he says that this animal is going to replace my korban ola, it's going to replace my korban shlomim. So the shaila is, what's he saying? So Meir says, you write Tvos Lashon Rishon, you go with what he said first, which is that it's Tumuras Ola, and he offers it, he has to treat it as a korban ola, and he offers it as a korban ola. Rabbi Yossi Omer says, Rabbi Yossi, im lechach niskavin mitchila, look, if his intention really, milichatchila, was for it to be a shlomim, so then, since this one animal can't be two things, Tvarav Kayomin, so then it's also taken into account. Rashi says, Tvarav Kayomin v'tir ad shetistoyev, so then you have to wait till it gets a mum, v'timocher, then let it be sold, v'yavid mechetzia, all of mechetzia shlom, so then, for half of its value, you bring an ola, for half of its value, you bring a shlom, i.e., that we take them both into account. V'im amar tmuras ola, but if he says, where am I? Right. But if he says tmuras ola v'nimlach v'amar tmuras shlomim, but if he says that it's going to be to replace an ola, but then he changed his mind and said it's going to replace the shlomim, harezo tmuras ola, so then we say no, you can't just change your mind, it's going to be, we're going to assume that it's in ola. V'avinabam, we ask, Nimlach pshita, obviously if he changed his mind, it doesn't count. Papa nimlach b'toch de dibor kamin. We're saying that no, that even though it was toch de dibor, even though he said it's going to be a ola, but then immediately changed his mind to be a shlam, but still we're going to treat it as an ola. So here we see that even though it's toch de dibor, we treat it as the ola, not like the shlamim. So therefore, it sounds like Rabbi Yossi is saying toch de dibor lav kedibor dami. So the Gemara is going to answer and say, look, it depends. It depends how big of a space there is. Right? There's two kinds of toch de dibor. Right? Toch de dibor, one definition is the amount of time that it takes for a student to say hello, to greet his teacher, which is Shalom Alecha Rebbe, 3 words. And the other toch de dibor is the amount of time that it takes for the student to the teacher to address his student, which is simply Shalom Alecha. It's only 2 words. So if it's the shorter toch de dibor, Rabbi Yossi holds of that it's kedibor dami. But if it's the longer toch de dibor, so then he would not say toch de dibor kedibor dami. So Amri trade toch de dibor have. There's 2 types of toch de dibor. Chad kedei sheles tamid l'rav. One is like the student addressing, greeting the teacher. The Talmud, and the other one is the amount of time that it takes the teacher to address the student. When Rabbi Yossi does not hold of toch de dibor, so that's kedei sheles Talmud l'rav shalom alecha Rebbe. That is the amount of time it takes for the Talmud to greet his teacher, which is Shalom Alecha Rebbe. Our Girsa says Shalom Alecha Rebbe Umori, but I think other Girsas say just Shalom Alecha Rebbe, and there's like a note here that says take it out. So I don't know, say Shalom Alecha Rebbe Umori or just Shalom Alecha Rebbe. I'm not sure, but it's the longer version. Dinafish, that's longer. Kedei sheles harav the Talmud Shalom Alecha Islay. But the amount of time that it takes for a teacher to greet his student, which is simply Shalom Alecha, Rabbi Yossi does hold of, he would say toch de dibur kedibur dami there. Friends, that was daf ein gimel of Masechta BavaKama. We kind of continue talking about Edom Zolman. We got into this, continued with the sugya of Edom Zolman Maferu Nifsal, Mekanu Lahabu Nifsal. We talked about toch de dibur, some interesting things. Open your peace out.